Welcome to another lockdown learning session with myself, Paul Holland. In this session, we are going to look again and just revise how to tell the time in Italian. Welcome to this session of lockdown learning on telling the time. Always a useful thing to have learnt actually in a modern language. Obviously in exams it comes up at some point where you'll have to recognise or you'll have to try to tell the time. But also if you ever go to visit or live in some of these places, then obviously there will come times when you need to ask what time it is and you'll need to understand the reply, or somebody comes up to you on the street and asks you what the time is. As a languages teacher and as a languages learner myself, telling the time is always a rather interesting one to study because it takes very, very little time just to go over the basics of how a language uses a particular system for getting around the clock face. And one of the interesting things is that once you've learnt those systems, it's pretty straightforward. What you need to know are your numbers. Do you know your numbers really, really well? Once you've got those in place and you understand how the different systems work, then you can tell the time. Good, so let's have a look at how this actually works in practice. These are the kind of phrases that you might ask if you want to know the time or if somebody asks you. Very, very common one is che ore sono, but you might also equally hear che ora è. The only difference is the bottom one is singular, what is the hour? The top one is the plural, what are the hours? And in a way that one makes more sense because as you'll see when you're telling the answer, when you're telling the time, in Italian you generally are using a particular plural construction. So that kind of makes some sense. What you definitely don't want to ask anybody is che tempo è, che tempo fa. Tempo, although it means the word time in some forms, generally means the weather. So if you hear somebody say to you, che tempo fa, it means what's the weather doing rather than anything to do with the time. Good. So let's have a look now at the basics of telling the time in Italian. Here's the clock face and here we go. Normally what you use is this expression for telling the o'clock time. So if you're looking at 4 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, you use the phrase sono le. You don't have an extra word after it. You just say the number, sono le. And as you can see, this is the plural. Le is a feminine plural because hour is feminine. And you're using sono, they are, or there are. So there are 2 hours. Sono le due. It's 2 o'clock. Sono le due. And here's another one for you. Sono le cinque. There are 5 of them, so it's plural. Sono le otto. And 11 o'clock. Sono le undici. Now, if you wanted to say at 11 o'clock, let's meet at 11 o'clock, then instead of saying sono le, which is it is, you change that to alle. Alle undici. Alle otto. So let's eat at 6 o'clock. Mangiamo alle 6. So here's 6 o'clock. Sono le 6. It is 6 o'clock. Let's give you another one or two. Sono le 9. It's 9 o'clock. And we've got one awkward one to notice. If you're saying 1 o'clock, then suddenly you're in the realm of singular hours. There's only 1 hour. So you would never say sono le una. Una is singular, so it needs to go to e. And then la, obviously because una begins with a vowel, you need to drop that a. So è l'una. È l'una. It is 1 o'clock. There are 2 special times of the day, of course, midday and midnight. You very rarely hear an Italian say sono le 12. It happens, I think I've heard it once or twice, but most of the time you'll hear it's midday, è mezzogiorno. And you can see the word giorno in there, so it's the daytime, è mezzanotte. for midnight, and you've got the word night embedded in there as well. So there's midday and midnight. So let's have a look again at the clock face here, and let's go into the time in more detail. What we need to know now is how to subdivide the clock face into its various parts. And of course, let's begin with the most traditional way of doing this, the way in which we all probably learnt how to tell the time. You go past the hour, so 6:15, 20 past 6, all the way until you reach the second half of the hour, and then you count towards the next hour, 25 to 7, 6:45. So let's take this time here between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and obviously we begin here with sono le tre at the top, so it's not like English. You don't say 3:30, you begin with the 3, you say it is 3 o'clock and a half. So there we go, sono le 3:30. Now, I learned it as mezza with an A on the end. I've definitely seen and read it and heard it as mezzo with an O on the end. I don't think it matters at all. I simply learnt it with an A. It makes sense to me because it's a half an hour. Hour is feminine, so mezza ora, o mezz'ora. So sono le 3:30 for me. Let's do the other big one, quarter past, sono le 3:15. And subdivide it even more, sono le 3:05, sono le 3:10, sono le 3:20, le 3:25. I've split that up for you just to make it easier to read. Actually, when you're writing an Italian number of that length, it's normally one word, but just so that you can see that it's split up into 25. And of course, going up the other side now, we need to begin not with sono le 3, but sono le 4. It's 4 o'clock. Sono le 4 meno un quarto, minus a quarter. And that meno means minus, so it works for all the other ones now. Let's fill them in. Sono le 4 meno 25, le 4 meno 20, le 4 meno 10, and le 4 meno 5. So now we can put all of these things together and practice them. 20 past 3, sono le 3:20. 10 to 4, sono le 4 meno 10. And we can go much more specific if we need to for very particular times. 23 minutes past 3, sono le 3:23. 13 minutes to 4, sono le 4 meno 13. 12 minutes to 4, sono le 4 meno 12. But of course we know, don't we, that there's another way to tell the time, and that is to begin with the hour right at the beginning, a little bit like the Italians do anyway, and to count all the way around without having to count up to the next hour halfway through. So instead of saying a quarter past 3, you'll simply hear 3:15 in English. Instead of saying 5 to 4, you'll simply hear 3:55. And it works in Italian largely, especially in the first half, pretty well the same as you've just experienced as well. So let's go all the way around the clock. Le 3:05, le 3:10, le 3:15. You do hear sometimes, but much more commonly just le 3:15, le 3:20, le 3:25. And here, instead of saying a half past, you can say le 3:30, le 3:35. So we're just carrying on counting around now. 3:40 will be le 3:40, le 3:45. There's your quarter to, much more common very often to hear them say le 3:45. 3:50, le 3:50, and finally le 3:55. So again, allowing you to be much more precise, 3:47 in Italian will be le 3:47. But how do you tell what time it is in the day? Well, in English we use this AM and PM, or we say 8 o'clock in the evening. In Italian, very simply, for the morning, alle 7 di mattina. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, le 3 del pomeriggio. And I think you can say di pomeriggio as well if you wanted to. The word for afternoon, pomeriggio, is in itself quite an interesting word, because you might know that PM in English stands for the Latin post meridian, which is after midday. Post meridian in Italian gradually became corrupted into pomeriggio. And 8 o'clock in the evening, alle 8 di sera. Anything really late in the evening, in the night time, would be di notte. Watch out with the word evening. The Italians tend to use it for much, much earlier in the day than we do. So you will hear it from about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. We tend to think of that possibly as still the afternoon. The Italians, easily from 4 o'clock, perhaps at the time that they begin in the summertime, particularly to do their passeggiata, their evening stroll through the town. That for the Italians is the sera, and it lasts right into the evening. Now, of course, you don't need to say what time of the day it is if you're using the 24-hour clock. This is really common on the continent, particularly for train times, for official documentation and all sorts of various other situations. The Italians do use it quite a lot, and for this reason you need to know the 24-hour clock numbers really well. Make sure you know the numbers from 13 through to 24. So if you need to say 6:30 in the evening, instead of the whole phrase, you simply say sono le 18:30. It's 1800 hours and 30. Sono le 18:30. Here are a couple more for you. 8:15 in the evening would be expressed as sono le 20:15. 10:25 at night, sono le 22:25. Good. I hope you now can tell the time in Italian and you can understand it if somebody tells it to you. Hopefully you're an expert now on telling the time in Italian. If that was useful for you, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Thank you. And hopefully you'll find something else useful in some of my other playlists. Thank you very much. Goodbye.